Good day and welcome once again to Success in IT. We're going to continue to explore spreadsheets with Microsoft Excel. And in this video, we're going to be looking closely at relative and absolute cell referencing. For today's exercise, I've created a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet has some items with their costs. We also have a VAT column and a total column. For those of you who are not familiar with VAT, VAT is a government tax that is applied to certain items in the retail environment. Sometimes you are going to find yourself in a situation where you have to create a spreadsheet, and there will be numerous records that are going to be required to reference one particular cell. Under normal circumstances, what you may find is that you may be able to perform calculations and you will be able to autofill the formula that is used for the first cell or the first row to the other cells below it. And when we do that, when we are able to autofill down and those cells would actually replicate themselves correctly, we call that relative cell addressing. So if we wanted to copy a formula down to the other cells, then we would use relative cell addressing, and I'm going to show you an example of this. If perchance we knew that the VAT percentage that we wanted to use for these items was, say, going to be fixed at 12.5%, let's say it was going to be fixed at 12.5%, then a simple formula to calculate what the amount of VAT that was going to be applied to this item here, spark plugs, which cost $25, we would simply create a formula where we would multiply the cost of the spark plugs by 12.5%. Okay, and in doing so, we would get a VAT amount of $3.13. If we wanted to apply this formula to the cells below, then we would simply autofill this formula or copy and paste. In this case, I'm going to use the autofill. In case you're not familiar with autofill, autofill is a tool that we can use in Microsoft Excel to apply formulas relatively, that's why it's called relative cell addressing. We can apply it relatively to the cells below or adjacent to the cells that the cell that we have just typed our formula in. So we have our formula of equals B4 times asterisk 12.5%, because we are assuming that the VAT percentage, the percentage of VAT that we are going to be applying, is 12.5%, and it's going to remain as 12.5% throughout. So autofill, we go to the fill handle in the bottom right hand corner of our active cell, hold down the left mouse button, and we drag downwards, and correctly you will realize that each of these cells have a VAT amount calculated based on the VAT percentage of 12.5%, and also you would realize that the formula relatively addresses the correct row and correct column. So that's why we call it relative cell addressing or relative addressing, because in each row you will see that our formula, you will notice that in the top here it is equals B4, whereas when we go down it's equal B5, equal B6, equal B7 times 12.5%. So that's relative cell addressing. Everything is relative to the row and column that we are referencing. On the other hand, there will be a situation, as I indicated, where you will have a particular value that you want to reference. Okay, one particular value that you want to reference, and maybe in that circumstance the value may change from time to time. So say for instance the VAT value, the value that we use as VAT, the 12.5%, may not be 12.5% all the time. Maybe in about 6 months or 7 months time it may change, or maybe there's a particular measure in place that the VAT amount will change periodically over maybe every 3 months or every 6 months or every year, and you do not want to have to go into all of your records and to make that change in the formula for all of your records. So if the VAT percentage was no longer 12.5%, but it was now 20%, then you would have to go back into your records. And I mean, right now we have 4 records, but in a realistic situation, you may have as many as maybe 100, maybe 500 records. Maybe there's 500 items or 1,000 items, and you don't want to go back in there and have to go ahead and change your formula. But what you want to do is be able to just change the VAT amount. So one of the ways I can do this is I can go into a particular cell. Let's just label this cell VAT percent, and in the VAT percent, I am going to, next to VAT percent, I'm going to put a figure of 12.5% here. So VAT is 12.5%. I'm putting this value here. Okay, maybe I'm just going to put it here instead. Let's just put it here instead. Okay, great. All right, so our VAT percent is 12.5%. So in this situation, rather than using within the formula 12.5%, in an absolute cell referencing situation, what you would do, okay, let's just remove what we have here. In an absolute cell referencing situation, what you would do is you would include in your formula cost times the cell that you are attempting to reference. So the value that you get would be the same when you use this method. All right, but I want you to observe something. If I go ahead and I autofill my formula down and I release, here's what happens. So in the initial formula, the value is correct. In the second, third, and fourth formulas, okay, in the second, third, and fourth formulas, there is a form of relative addressing being done. Because if you notice, the leading address, which is the address of each row that we are multiplying by, the cell in each row that we are multiplying, okay, B4, B5, B6, B7, although this is correct, the address of the cell that we were referencing, which is F3, and it is correct here, is attempting to relatively address, okay, this formulas are attempting to relatively address the cell that we are multiplying by as well, and that is not what we want. That is not what we want. So the formula, in a sense, is correct, but in its correctness, this is not what we want ideally to happen. We do not want the cell that we are multiplying by, the VAT percentage, okay, address, to be changed. We want it to remain the same. So we will modify our formula, and we are going to use a wildcard symbol of the dollar sign before the row and dollar sign before the column. So what will happen is that these two wildcard symbols that we put here, the dollar sign F and the dollar sign 3, these two wildcard symbols that we have inserted will tell Microsoft Excel, will tell the spreadsheet that we want to lock in the column and we want to lock in the row, and these are the values. This is the value that we want to use throughout all of our cells. So when we autofill down, it gives us, and if you look at our formulas, it gives us an absolute value for our VAT percentage. Okay, and that is why we call it absolute cell referencing. We have a cell that is absolute, and that is the cell that we want to reference throughout our formulas. So we can now go ahead and we can calculate our totals. So a total that the individual would probably be paying for spark plugs would be the cost plus the VAT. We can autofill here, and once again, relatively, the cells will be referenced relatively according to the row and column, and that is correct. Okay, unlike here where we wanted to reference one cell, here we want to reference relatively going down the rows. All right, and then our grand total. Okay, we can either use our sum function or we can autofill. All right, and we have our grand total. And that concludes our tutorial on relative and absolute cell referencing in our Spreadsheets with Microsoft Excel series. I hope it was informative and that it clarifies any issues for you in dealing with or using relative and absolute cell referencing.